Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one and only Maynard James Keenan. Maynard, thank you for having me here today.
Thank you for coming all this way. I realize it's a long way to go, but we're in the middle of Crush, so I couldn't really leave.
I wanted to talk to you about you're in three different bands. Why would you start a third band, Puscifer? How did that come about?
The origins of Puscifer actually came about around 94, when the other one was just in its infancy as well. So there's a lot of comedy, a lot of sketch comedy attached to the original Puscifer stuff that predates the appearance on Mr. Show. There was a club called Tantrum in LA, hosted by Laura Milligan, and a bunch of all the names you've heard over the years: Tenacious D, David Cross, Bob Odenkirk, Brian Posehn, Pat Oswalt, all these people, Janine Garofalo. The list, it's a long list of people that were working that comedy circuit back at that time that went on to do various sketch things and movie things. And that's where Puscifer started. It started as the closing musical act of Tantrum. We would kind of alternate weeks with Tenacious D.
If you had to say what the difference between the three different bands is, how do you think about each one?
Well, they're different conversations, right? Just like when you have various jazz musicians get together, they're not going to regurgitate. These three guys aren't going to regurgitate the same thing that these three guys with a common person in it. It's not going to be the same thing. It's just like that with conversations with writing. Tool, Perfect Circle, Puscifer, those are different conversations with different people that approach puzzles in a different direction.
We were talking about Fairlight synthesizers just a second ago, about how the way that they worked initially, they would, to get longer samples, from what I understand, is that they would downsample. You'd go from 24-bit to 8-bit samples, and then it would create this aliasing or the degradation of sound, which gave it the unique tones.
Right.
So your latest Puscifer record, you used a Fairlight in.
I should be clear. Matt used the Fairlight.
Matt used the Fairlight.
That would my brain would explode trying to navigate all the stuff he had to navigate to make those old cars run.
So how do you do that exactly? How did that happen? Can you talk about the process of that record?
Well, he became fascinated with a lot of those old synthesizers, and he bought a bunch of different ones. Fairlight being the main one that we're using, and the beauty of it is that, like you said, it's degrading the thing, and it becomes a unique sound. And even within the parameters of the Fairlight, there's a limitation to what it can produce for a sound. So Matt and I are kind of the guys that, you walk in and there's a box of stuff, and that's your limitation. That's what you get to use to come up with a creative thing. So the Fairlight boxes you in with very specific sounds that now you're having to dance around. So if you're listening closely to Existential Reckoning, you're going to hear sounds that you heard on Kraftwerk, on Art of Noise. Yes, there's a whole bunch of classic, Peter Gabriel stuff. You're going to hear like, that sounds familiar. That's because that's the sound that the Fairlight makes, and now it's your job to add your signature on top of that thing. God bless him, all the hair he had to pull out. He has none left anyway, so he had to import hair to pull it out to make that work.
Talk about the songwriting process. What your songwriting process is. Do you like to work on songs from the ground up? Do you like having a track kind of finished before you start working on the melody? Do you write the melody and then write the lyrics to the melody? How do you think about things?
Generally speaking, because I accidentally only work with very strong personalities, stubborn people, I almost have to let them take the first step first and then react, and allow them to see the reaction so they can build on the reaction. And that's the same across all those projects. I don't normally come in and go, here's a semi-finished or partially finished piece or bit or riff. Early days, yes, but once you start to see the strengths of other people you're working with, just, step back, don't get in the way. stay in your lane. So you let those people chase their tails on some stuff, and they present you something that might be partially finished, that might be barely finished, might be very well developed, and then I create vocal rhythms to those
With
pieces.
syllables, usually?
Syllables, yeah,
That will
usually.
suggest lyrics eventually.
Yeah, and a lot of it is just time. It's just driving around in the car with that one riff on loop, or in the winery or wherever, just letting it. You have to absorb it in order to react to it, to where it becomes second nature. You hear the upbeats, you hear the downbeats, you hear the breaks, and then, especially during Crush, because I'm a captive audience. Matt will come out with his rig during Crush, and we have a studio set up in the house. And so in between press loads or bin loads of destemming, pop down to the studio and just in the moment grab some stuff. And I say in the moment, I've spent weeks driving around the car trying to just mentally think about it and then lay down improv.
Improv wordless vocal typically with
Correct.
maybe a couple words in there or something,
Maybe, yeah.
or maybe not. And then
Maybe
you
not.
make a recording of that and then listen to that,
Correct.
right?
Yeah. And a lot of it then is me actually counting syllables and counting beats between, and then formulating what is the key line that attaches itself to the whole picture of this song. And then I'll build off that line, subject-wise. So it's very much a combination of prior work that, I couldn't do this if I haven't been doing it since high school.
Right.
Right? You have to put the work in to really understand, like in choir in high school, like our choir teacher would play a note on the piano, and then she would go like this. That's the note. And then a cappella, all of us, we would have to sing to the note she's indicating by moving her hand up and down. And she would do this for about 4 measures. You sure? And then play the note on the piano to see how off we were.
Right.
So it's really is it's drilling, just like jujitsu, just like anything you do. You have to drill the pieces to actually have a grip on the overall picture. So improvisation, it sounds, you just make it up. No, there's a lot of foundation, there's a lot of work that went into it before you do it, having done it for decades. So when I'm riffing to those pieces, I already have an idea of what I've done, what I haven't done, and how do you find a way to make it so that it's your signature? It's going to be your signature.
Yeah.
But how do you draw outside your own box?
One of the things that you're particularly great at is writing over riffs. And that's one of the hardest things to do. What is your process with that?
Well, part of it is understanding rhythms, and like I said, driving around in the car, getting those riffs and those rhythms and those time signatures just to be part of your body, right? To understand what they are, and then in order to actually write good melodies, you have to have, you have to have exposure. So the best art is, of course, stolen, right? So if you listen to shitty singers, you're probably not going to write great melodies. So going to the source, going to what has inspired you as far as melody. So Susie Sue and Joni Mitchell and Stevie Wonder and just incredible vocalists that navigate those riffs, those melodies with a vocal melody that juxtaposed, balances, matches up, old Bon Scott timings and everything and rhythms. You have to have a background and understanding and listening to those things to know where to start.
I read your Joni Mitchell interview from 1995.
Oh, right.
And it was absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
Joni, talk about Joni Mitchell's music.
Well, she was excited about the article when it came out because I just let her waffle. Everybody tries to edit her down and try to pinch her into a particular agenda of questions, and I was like, no, just be you. Just talk like you write. And I just let her talk like she writes. It's just like all over the map rhythmically. ups and downs and push and pulls, and that was the conversation. That's what I wanted out of the. I mean, I'm happy with what I got. You know, you just can't go in with expectations with a conversation with Joni. That's it.
I had dinner with Joni last year. I asked her what her favorite record was, both songwriting and production, what she felt was the most fully realized. And she said that Court and Spark and Hejira were her two. She thought that the songwriting and the production were really.
Well, she's wrong. Blue is in there.
Well, she said about Blue, she's like, my dad used to say to me, there must be a lot of depressed people out there that they like this. And Blue is one of the greatest records of all time.
Yeah. Yes. 100%.
So if I ask you this about your different, what records that you've made that you feel that the recording of it from a production point of view and the songwriting is something that you think is, or it could be individual songs even.
Well, yeah, and that's a very.
You made a lot of records.
It's made a lot of. Well, I made a lot of records, but also, I don't rest on my laurels with them. I mean, going back to like AC/DC, right, with Brian Johnson, like that. This album is pretty much like that album, and it's a great thing. You know what you're going to get when you get a new, one of the newer AC/DC albums. But I don't write that way.
Right.
I'm trying to reinvent as I go. So I'm going to say the last 3 recent albums because that's me trying to build on what I've already done. So as far as really challenging yourself, like on the last Perfect Circle, Eat the Elephant, the first 3 tracks on that were me trying to be as quiet and subtle and higher register as I could be effective. And then actually be able to translate that live, that's the bigger challenge, is making that, how do I do that in front of an audience and it actually translates? So that challenge, I feel like I met it as well as I could. And same thing on Existential Reckoning, and same thing on the recent Tool album.
When you're working on a song with vocal performance, how do you know when it's done? Or how do you know when a lyric is where you want it to be? Do you ever come back and say, you know what, I want to change this line after the song has been recorded? Or, I mean, not.
Well, I've done that.
Yeah.
Yeah. With Tool and Perfect Circle, I feel like some of those end up being, that's a finite thing. I don't change them too much.
Yeah.
With Pussifer, I intentionally go back to change it just because I want to. Like, so Matt and I love like going back and completely reinventing the song and doing it again in a different way. Having said that, there's nuances to the recording. You haven't lived with it, you haven't toured it, that of course, as you tour it, you find other subtle dimensions to it that bring more life into it, just in terms of the push-pull, the subtle crescendos. Are we clipping it? Are we sustaining it? And you find your groove in the song as you tour. So the changes come subtly with the execution on the road with all those songs, really. With Pussifer in particular, though, Matt's I'm gonna break that song now. We're just gonna redo it and just have more fun with it to see what we can come up with.
Now, are you writing when you're on the road ever? Or do you pretty much just perform?
No,
when you're on the
road is, it's you're only actually technically working for, 2-3 hours a night. But for me, that's not the case, because, I'm preparing my body for two days from now based on what I'm eating, based on the sleep regimen I'm getting, like not going out. You got to remember that's. Your average day on the road is going to be you're waking up at 10 a.m., kind of, right?
Right.
Because you're traveling, and then I have to prepare right away. I have to figure out what I'm having that morning to start my day. Is it going to be a walk? Is it going to be yoga? Is it going to be jujitsu? And then you have to prepare for sound check. And that tunes you to the room, tunes you to the space. And then after that, again, some kind of training to prepare for that night. If it's yoga, if it's a walk, if it's jiu-jitsu, if it's Muay Thai, something to prepare for that night. And then I have to eat either at 3 o'clock or not until 11:30.
After the show.
Yeah, because I can't eat too close to the show because I'm carrying it around, and you risk reflux, and now you've compromised your voice for the next 3 shows. So I have to eat early in the day, knock that out, and then after the show, if you talk to any dietitians, they're like, "You're eating at 11:30 at night or midnight? What's wrong with you?" And then now you're going to go to bed on a full stomach.
Right, which is terrible.
Which is terrible. But that's when you get to eat. That's it. Otherwise, I'm not eating from 3 a.m. till 10 a.m. or 3 p.m. till 10 a.m. the next day. So you have to time all that stuff so you get it in. And then you're going to bed, usually on a bus.
Right.
And if you can imagine having a nice cozy bed, that's not the bus. It's not a cozy bed. But having like 3 weightlifters on either, 4 weightlifters on either corner of the bed, every 15 minutes, just shaking it while you're trying to sleep. That's bus life.
So do you wake up some days and think, oh,
Did I actually sleep?
right. No, seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, you wake up exhausted. You're like, oh my God,
So what do you do
did we
then?
go through a cornfield last night? So you just have to get like an extra half hour of quiet, solid sleep, and on your days off, go to bed.
Yeah.
That's it. Go to bed, don't do anything, maybe a little workout, don't eat heavy.
Guitar players, drummers, they don't have to worry about these things.
No, because they
really.
don't have this delicate, they don't have this delicate set of vocal cord things that can be damaged and the show's gone. But, guitar player, drummers, if they mess around and do something like jujitsu, or if they break a finger because they're being flippant about that kind of thing, well, yeah, now the show's completely compromised because they can't use these. So it's similar, but it's not as volatile or vulnerable, I should say, as, the vocal cords when it comes to diet, sleep. Because sleep is a huge piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely.
Huge piece.
Now, we were talking earlier about the looking at videos, for example, that you made, whenever, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and then you look at them now and about just the quality of video and to talk about that for a minute, about what you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's I can go back and I can still watch VHS tapes because there's a charm and a quality to VHS bit rate, I guess. Is that what it is? Bit rate? Yeah, okay. Compared to the extreme HD version of everything today, where you're like, it's nose hairs and weird stuff. I'm pretty sure that's a wig, because you can see it. It's you see the lace line on the wig, as opposed to that slightly lower res thing. And I feel like for winemaking that's effective, for cooking that's effective, and for making music that's effective. That's why something like the Fairlight is a great instrument, or like a piano that's not quite in tune.
Right.
What do you call it? With the pump, Mellotron or something.
Oh, the
like
Mellotron. Yeah.
Those things, they're never quite
No, there's
where
never.
they need to be. Yeah, yeah.
They're kind of like a Fairlight, early
Yeah,
version of the
right.
Fairlight.
So working with those things, it gives you that humanity. So even though they're kind of digital analog, there is like a human quality to it because it's not perfect. So I don't know. I think music that's strictly, purely digital it can be very one-dimensional and boring, and that's the beauty of producers like, I guess Dr. Dre would be like one of the start of the whole hip-hop rap movement, as from my generation.
Yeah.
There was some clunkiness to it, and he was actually borrowing from older recordings with the scratchy, the vinyl noise, and that's something as an artist in that moment you realize, like, this is too clean. I have to add some dust to this, mess it up, stomp on it a little bit.
When you started with Tool back in '93, you guys, so all the records were analog records, and then Perfect Circle. When did you start making digital records then, probably? around
Well, I
2000 or
think-
so?
no,
Or did you
for-
still record on tape?
I started doing right into Pro Tools with Tool back on. I
Late
want to say it
90s?
was on. Yeah, that was with David Bottrell. There were some Pro Tools going on with that.
You'd be
And then when he
syncing
got,
with
and
it.
then Billy was all about the Pro Tools
Yeah.
rig and Logic. And then even some of the early Pussifer stuff, early 2000s, that was all finally you start to get it dialed in
Yeah.
to make it work. You have to bring the humanity to it back then because you didn't have all the cool plugins to make it do this thing. So that's why on the first Pussifer album, full-length album, V's for Vagina, we're recording that thing in hotel rooms. Every hotel you can think of, every kind of studio across the country we could pop into and do it. Because Matt was on the road with me, with Tool. And so we would do this thing on days off. And then we actually ran it back through 2-inch tape to see if we could add something to it. The sound, it wasn't quite right, because it's not the same. It's not
Yeah.
the same as doing it in the studio to the 2-inch tape. We captured a lot of human moments digitally, but as far as actually getting the grit, it's not the same as 2-inch tape.
Just out of curiosity, when you finish a mix of a record of a song, do you go drive around in your car and listen to it and take notes? What do you do?
Yeah,
Do you have a certain place that you like to listen?
I'm kind of I'm the last QC on some of those things because Matt has a better ear for those things. Billy, Danny Carey, they have the better ear for those things. I'm the guy who's driving around listening to it. I try to do another activity,
Yeah.
so I'm not focused on it. What I'm listening for is the shit that stands out that bugs me. I just want to hear the stuff that bugs me. And I'll go back and go, dude, we have to edit this thing or adjust this thing or let me sing that line again to fix that thing because if I have to live with that for the rest of my life, I can't listen to this song.
Yeah.
So let me fix my part on that thing, or can we dip this down, or it's a mix issue where
So
something should
anything
be
that jumps
featured.
out then, anything that
Mostly-
jumps out when you're kind of just not even paying attention, right?
Yeah, and it's the same with, I know crossing streams here, but like with wine, right? Wine's supposed to be delicious. If you have to explain the wine, it's probably not a great wine
Right.
for you. If I have to explain it to you, you're not going to go back to the wine just because I explained it. If it's not delicious to you immediately, what's the point? So in winemaking, you have to make it so that it ticks all the boxes of what a wine should be, and usually the grapes will present that. But if it's so eccentric and weird and you have to explain it and it's off, it's going to be off for most people, right? So you want to get it right the first time and move forward.
Winemaking, there's science, there's art, there's improvisation, very similar to music, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, fruit shows up. For example, we have various ways that we ferment. So we'll just talk about reds. It's a barely a 1-ton plastic bin, or it's a 1.6-ton stainless steel container, or it's a much larger concrete tank that we're going to ferment in. But in that stainless steel tank, for me to do a submerged cap fermentation, which is basically like a pressure cooker,
Okay.
the fermentation creates the heat and creates the bubbles, and so it pushes this lid up like a pressure cooker. It stops the skins from coming up, and the juice kind of bubbles up through it, right? But that's 1.6 tons specifically, okay? So if the fruit comes in, and I've got 3.4 tons, what the fuck am I going to do with the
What do you
0.2
do?
the 0.2? Well, that's the improv, right? That's what you do. You have to look and go, okay, well, if I have the 0.2, then we'll do 2 bins of 0.8 tons, and we'll do the 1.6 in the submerged cap container. Submerging them, doing them in the punch downs, open top punch downs, and those things, that slightly changes the profile of that wine. The submerged cap pulls out other things that's not going to. This thing pulls out things that the submerged cap's not going to. So I've changed the profile of the wine subtly by that decision. But I have to be conscious of that decision and what that end game is, knowing what the result is. with experience.
Which is kind of like you described writing melodies. Tell me what, if you were going to listen to something today when you're out walking around the vineyard and you want to put on something that's inspiring, what would you put on? What would you listen
Well,
to?
I'll show you the photo. In the winery, when fruit comes in, I have a soundtrack.
Okay.
So I pick, and it might be historical work. Whenever we're picking the Judas Nebbiolo, I have Blonde Redhead and Ahmad Jamal playing. That's 100% what's going to happen with that fruit when it comes in. That's the soundtrack for that day.
Okay.
There's other things that are going to come in that are straight up Devo. There's going to be things that are going to be Tejanos radio on Pandora, right? So historically, I'll pick the same soundtrack for that wine, so when we actually present the tasting notes, what we played when that came in, when it was first picked and processed, that's on the tasting notes. But in the cellar, if I'm actually trying to make these decisions, it can't be Metallica.
Okay.
It can't be Slayer. I'll listen to that when I'm doing cleanup, or if it's like the in-between times and I just like the metal's going while I'm doing a thing, that's fine. But when I'm actually having to think, it's stuff more like Swans and Low and Tones on Tail and PJ Harvey, Gillian Welsh is a big one on the list. So that's I can think in that space, and there's a little bit of slight sadness to it. So you're also in a melancholy state of mind while you're making these decisions. That's just natural for me.
Would you say that that's your natural space as a songwriter, is a melancholy?
Yeah.
Because your melodies, I always get that from it, and that's why I enjoy your music so much.
You have all your early influences and things that pop up that you listen to as a child, but the two albums that I can remember most going, this, in hindsight, 2020 hindsight, going, these albums changed the way that I thought of music, and it was Black Sabbath first album,
Right.
and Joni Mitchell Blue. So those are the ones that kind of like guided what my musical taste. Like, I've listened to a million things over the years, all of it, but those were the ones that I kind of cut my teeth on with understanding that. I came late to Led Zeppelin. I came late to a lot of those other bands, but those are the ones that I remember. On Saturday morning over at my aunt's house, my grandfather was the chief of police, constantly in her car, an old Ford Falcon, vacuuming up the pot seeds out of her back seat because he's the chief of police and he can't have his daughter driving around with pot in her car. She's the one going, you got to check this out, Blue. Got to check out Black Sabbath.
Those two records really hold up and are as good. To me, both those records always have remained the same.
Yeah.
They just instantly do. It's the same thing for you, right? They just bring back that.
For sure, yeah. And over the years, I've had various vehicles that I drive. Like I've got my truck or my FJ, or I have a smart car in LA because it's easier to park. Parking in LA, Jesus Christ. But I have soundtracks that go with each one, and one of them is Kraftwerk Electric Cafe on repeat, on loop. Or in the truck, it's Black Sabbath.
So your range of the things that you like that's really why you have three different bands.
Probably. I guess, again, it's also logistics of timing. Like the guys in Tool, they just take longer to process information and get it together and then present me something that I can start building on. I've made the mistake in the past of trying to build on something that wasn't ready yet.
Yeah.
And then all the work I put into building on the thing, they changed the foundation. So if I'm trying to decorate the house and then you move where the doors are or move the windows or add a floor, I got to start over as an interior decorator, right? So I have to wait for them to do it. So there's time. I have time to do all these other things in between because I can and I should.
The first two Tool records, I think, are 3 years apart, and then there's a 5-year gap or so, and then there's another 5-year gap. That was actually really unusual during that time period for artists to take that long between albums.
Yeah, I guess.
But you make the music when it's ready. You put it out when it's ready, right?
One could argue a little bit of discipline and a little prodding, a little cattle prod or a taser would help move those guys along a little faster, but that's their process. You just have to kind of respect it. It's frustrating. I'm sure they're frustrated with me because they hand it to me and I'm like, it's done. Like, you didn't take any time with it? Yes, I took 50 years.
Right.
For this reaction to these things. I've been preparing for decades to hear these things and be able to react honestly. And I riff on them, on all the projects. I riff on the thing. I go back. I try to beat the riff. I try to beat the riff again. I actually record words to some stuff and try to beat it. And I usually come back to the first or second stream of consciousness take because that's the jazz part of it. Your first reaction probably was the correct reaction because it's partly conscious, but mostly unconscious reaction to the rhythms, having not reacted at all by listening to it for a week or two driving around in the car.
Do you ever save your old work tapes or your work?
Oh, God, no.
You destroy them immediately.
No, I don't
right?
destroy them. If I even have them somewhere, I don't know, but probably not. But I don't want to regret not going with that one.
Right. You don't want to.
This is the
you don't wanna think
decision we
about it
made.
again.
We go this way, not that way.
Do you ever go back and listen to any of your records, or once they're done, that's it?
It'll come up and I'll listen to them sometimes, especially like when we're going to go back on a tour. Like if we go back out with Perfect Circle, there's going to be I'm going to try to do songs we haven't done.
Yeah.
So I have to go back and listen to that song and remember not the recording, but what it became while we were doing it live. Because you fixed it. Whatever the nuances were that didn't get caught in the recording, you fixed it. Now I got to remember, listening to the original recording, what that was before we go and dust those off.
I did a breakdown of Weak and Powerless on my YouTube channel, and I went back and listened to it yesterday, and that is one of my all-time favorite songs. But that and The Noose, which follows it, is such a great. Those two songs back to back are so amazing. It's really beautiful and so different from each other. And they both have sadness that I love about music, and it's the note choices that you make though that really use what I call haunting tones. It's just the way that you hear these things, or do you experiment and look for those spots to go to these particular notes?
Well, again, that's stealing professional steel, right? And so really looking at the work of people like P.G. Harvey, Trent on The Fragile. He's stealing shit all over that album, but I'm stealing from his stolen goods. I think space was the thing that really I wanted to hear more space in some of the Perfect Circle stuff.
Yeah.
So going back to my original influences of the Swans, early Holy Money and Greed albums, the huge cavern of space that are in those albums, simple rhythms, just primal in their approach. I wanted to see more of that in when you think of Perfect Circle and Swans. They're not the same thing.
Right.
But logistically, if you look at the waveforms on paper, on a screen of those songs, you see the space in The Noose that might match the space on the screen of a Swan song. And that was the point of like leaving space to let your brain is just going in the middle of the spaces. And Josh is a great drummer, but I remember on The Noose going, stop playing right there.
Right.
Don't play through. Stop. And he's like, oh. Because he already has done that in other things, but like you have to remind him, you've already done something like this. Now do that, do that again. Leave space. And it really sells the atmosphere of the track. As contrasting to Weak and Powerless, which is like a metronome just right through your head. Yeah. Again, stolen from Trent.
We won't tell him.
Don't tell him.
You
Don't watch this, Trent.
You do leave space in your melodies too, which is amazing. You're not afraid to leave space. I think a lot of contemporary music that I hear, there's no space at all. Every lyric, there, you go verse and well, there's no pre-choruses to songs anymore than chorus, and there's no bridges anymore to songs.
Right.
Everything is just jam-packed together, and people are afraid to leave, to let the music breathe. How important is that?
It's crucial. It's 100% crucial to me. It's what makes the song, you know, joy and sadness. You have to have the balance of both of them. So noise and silence are critical as far as contrast. Anybody who's gone through a first year of, formal art training at a university or college, that's one of the first things you learn in perspective and just drawing in general is the contrast of light and dark. So that has to, for a song to be effective, I think it has to have all of those things. And you're right, everything's a commercial now. It's a TikTok video, and it's got to jam all this shit into a tight space and just get up in your business immediately without any kind of digestion or room for thought. So early Pink Floyd will hang on a note for like, where are they going with this?
Right.
Yeah. Low, like just vast amounts of space, and the vocals, just the lines lingering. Old psychedelic furs, like Butler's single note vocal that's got the grit, and it just grits, and it's monotone, and it's there, and then it disappears, and then the grit comes back in. It becomes it's a texture rather than a vocal.
Do you think that people have lost the ability to experience music like that because of things like TikTok?
I'm 58. I don't care. It'll come back around. Things do come back around.
Yeah.
People start to appreciate those things, and maybe something good will come out of those weird soundbite, narcissistic rabbit holes. I don't know. I'm the old dude. It's like back in my day, our music had space.
When I listen to the latest Pussifer record, I notice it's really headphone music.
Mm-hmm.
Most Pussifer records are headphone music.
Pussifer records are headphone albums,
and
for
that
sure.
and it's because to explain to people, it's a lot of it's panning and where things are actually placed.
Right.
Do you guys think about that? Do you say let's put this over here, or it needs a part over here?
100% Matt Mitchell. Producer, writer, engineer, mixer. He is the mastermind behind all of those things, and he understands those textural landscapes. Like Wax Trax, that era of record labels, that's like the Chicago and Texas-based
Yeah.
album. Okay, Big Black and pre-Ministry kind of style of music, but he's also into Hot Chip. So it's all about the textures. It's all about the stereo and landscape. Audio landscape that he's building in there. And then now you combine that with me trying to not be the focal vocal, right? It's me and Karina trying to play off of each other, matching, diverging, to create vocal textures in his landscape. Right?
How do you and Karina work on your vocal parts together? Will you have a vocal and then do you work out things together like that? What do you do?
Generally speaking, I'll take the first run on those riffings.
Yep.
Go back and try to organize it, figure out what works best. I might come up with harmonies. I'd say 50% of the time I'll have harmonies in mind, and I'll put them on. And then I'll go, I'm jammed up here, I don't know where to go in this part. So she'll take parts of what we did and her reactions to what I did, and she'll retool them into a later part of the song that is a callback to what we did, and with extra harmonies that I didn't even expect. And she really gets that this is somewhere between Black Sabbath, Kraftwerk, and Devo. B-52s in there for flavor, right? She gets that, so we're playing off each other. And the hard part is making sure that we're not, neither one thing is a lead, it's just an instrument, and it's syncing up. And her textures, her vocal texture, Juliette Camagere, I worked with her a little bit more earlier on, and we've worked with her since. The three of us, those vocal textures complement each other really well. And it's about listening. I think that's part of getting through any of these things. Winemaking, fruit shows up, these guys have riffs, these people are singing together. If you don't have the listening skill far more honed than your regurgitating skill, you might get lucky on your first album, but then it's going to slowly degrade by your third or fourth album because you're not listening anymore. You think, I'm the man. Anything I do is going to be amazing because I sold a bunch of records first time.
This may be a strange question, but are you the final say? Do you have the final say
No.
when something's done?
No, because if you end up being the final say and you're wrong, it has to be by committee. Even if it's fucking death by committee.
Yeah.
It has to be by committee because you have to trust each other at the end of the day for it to be the full encompassing piece with several sets of eyes on it,
So every different,
ears on it.
all your three different bands, you guys will come to a mutual agreement when a record is finished or a song is finished.
Generally
Pretty much,
speaking,
right?
yeah. I mean, there might be songs where I go, no man,
The bass needs to
trust
come
me
up.
on this. Trust me on this one. You know, you might pick your battles
Yeah.
on certain tracks, but generally speaking, it's a mutually arrived upon.
Does everyone want their parts louder typically or no?
Tool, yeah, yeah. It's a fight to the death every fucking time. But that's typical with a live band.
Yeah.
With 4 people who are deaf. Old guys that are deaf. I can't hear me. You're deaf. No, but yeah, I think generally speaking though, it is you're looking for the balance of it.
Back in the day, people used to have records mixed and they would be in the mixing, they'd be there for the mix a lot of times, right? And records are not really made that way anymore. They're not mixed that way or anything. Is that good or bad?
Well, I think because of the nature of being able to recall something in Logic or Pro Tools, Matt definitely sets up, we have a whole Neve board that he sets up to mix everything on, so it's not super easy to recall that. He has to set that thing up, and
Yeah.
the studio is now a mixing studio for the duration of mixing. So we make sure that that thing is what it's going to be to the end of time until we're done mixing. So the ease of recalling it's easier than it might have been when you're paying $3,000 a day plus.
Yeah.
Back in the day with a mixer, you're just trying to get it done because you're hemorrhaging money in the studio with every, who wants lunch? And there's $5,000. But I think it's better now.
Yeah.
And for us, because we are doing it the old analog way on a board, mixing it like you would in a normal studio. But we have our studio, we have our own board, and the recalls end up being easier, and it's actually less tedious when you get, Matt will say, okay, 11 p.m. a mix is going to come in. Let me know in the morning what you've got, and so I can sit there with my blue headphones and take notes and come back and listen to it piece by piece, all at once, drive around with it. And, when it comes to mixing, you've done it. Like, oh, this song sounds weird on my phone. Yeah, it's coming out of this little speaker, right? At the Portlandia scene, like, doesn't it sound great on these little speakers? No, it does not. That's the joke, right?
Isn't it funny
So-
though that is a thing even that who would have thought
Right.
back in 1998?
I'm going to listen to my music through these salt and pepper shakers.
Right.
What? So I have to go. I drive around. I'll put it in my truck and drive around. I'll stream it off my iPhone. I'll actually get put it on a flash drive and put it through my stereo. Remember
Right.
those? There's like
Yeah.
those two speakers, a right and a left, with an amp. Remember those?
I do.
Yeah. So I put it through that just to see what that sounds like pre-mastering in those various settings. Each track.
But you do listen on, but you will listen through the speakers on your phone too, though, right?
Yeah.
Because you
Yeah.
know that a lot of people are gonna listen
Yeah,
like
and
that.
if the vocal's way too loud because just the frequency that it's sitting at
Yeah.
on that phone, it sounds weird because now you sound out of tune because the music is slightly pitched down, and you sound like you're sharp.
Right.
So you have to pay attention to those things. You miss them. I missed a lot of them. Go back and listen and go, God damn it. Too late.
If one of your songs comes on a TV show, on the radio, on whatever, just where do you listen to it or not?
Well, it depends on the show, right?
Okay.
If it's Yellowstone, I'm going to watch it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. If it came on the radio, let's say that you actually listen to the radio, or if you're listening to, I mean, do you stream typically? You remember what a radio is, right?
Yeah, I think
okay,
so.
let's say when people used to listen to the radio 5 years ago, Maynard.
Back with the fireplace,
Back
and
with the
everybody's sitting
fireplace.
around the old radio
Would you-
listening to
would
the
you
world
listen-
being invaded by aliens.
Okay, so we'll have to go back 15 years now.
Okay.
When you're driving around,
Yeah.
you'd be driving around wherever, and a song would come on the radio. Do you turn it off, or do you listen to it, or do you
I'll
listen to a
listen
little bit of it?
I want to listen to it because I want to see what it sounds like
Yeah.
on that car stereo because there's a weird compression that goes on, and you got to hear what you have to pay attention to that. That's part of our world.
Remember how radio stations had different compressors, and your song would sound, man, my song sounds so much better here in Iowa
Yes.
than it did on this station.
Yeah, you do notice that. Yeah, it's weird. I do notice the degradation over when you're just Bluetoothing it through the MP3, MP 1.5. I definitely can hear like all the cool stuff disappearing. The low response stuff.
This year you were touring from what, January till July, something like that?
Yeah, I got home on July 11th and dove right into Harvest.
Now, does that drive you nuts being away from home for that long?
Yeah, but COVID, you're trying to cram 3 years of touring into 1 year. So you have to catch up.
Is
You
that
have
the
to do it.
longest stint that you've done in the past, or that?
No, back in the early days when you were bulletproof,
Yeah.
you could do a lot more touring, but can't really do that now. Your body can't take it. So you have to really pace yourself. So it's been pretty grueling going right back out this fall with Pussifer. Probably going to go to Europe next summer, do the festivals with Pussifer, because this is our time. We haven't toured since 2016, so this is our time to take our 12, 14 months to work this new album.
And the vineyard, how do you work that around Harvest?
Grapes don't give a fuck about your band, 100%. So they start coming at the end of July,
Yeah.
and we usually see our last fruit somewhere near the middle of September. Then you have that 3 or 4 weeks of processing that until it's done, and you can walk away by the middle of October.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years, as far as music?
Well, it all depends on the state of things, right? You could say that. Imagine saying that in 2002, right? Go, where are we going to be in 5 years? Well, from the time we started recording V is for Vagina with Pussifer to the day that we released it, the music industry bottom fell out.
Yeah.
So easily 1 out of 5 record stores were even in existence from the time we recorded it to the time we released it. Like Tower Records gone, Virgin Megastore gone, Walmart refusing to take your record anyway, Target going, vagina? Really? No. And returning your records because it has the word vagina on it. You kind of saw it coming, and the record labels had been fat and greedy up to that point, so it's understandable that, easily 50% or 75% of the label's staff were gone between 2001 and 2010.
Yeah.
So for us, depending on what's next for us, I'm a farmer, so I'm seeing a lot of climate nuances going on. I see whispers of water wars. The current political situation is mind-boggling. So I don't know where we're going to be in 5 years. I just know that if we can be adaptable, we'll survive all of those things. So that's going to be the biggest trick, is just being adaptable to what's coming next. So
But you see yourself, you're going to still be making music.
we're going
though.
to still be making music. I'm going to still be making wine. I'm going to still be like growing food, and my ducks will hopefully still be producing eggs. Like, you know, all those things are going forward, unless they're not.
Right.
And that's really what it comes down to. If you're going to be a jazz-like musician in life in general, you have to be adaptable.
This is the first time I've been up here to this area of
Verde
Arizona.
Valley.
And it's absolutely beautiful. Do you want people to know that or not?
Well, I want you, come
Is that-
visit.
is
Come
that-
visit.
Is that a secret or
Come
not?
visit, and then fuck off.
I mean, it's really,
Get out.
it's really beautiful here. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous.
I don't usually,
But it's nothing new. It's for years the destination locations in Arizona have been Sedona, Jerome, and the Grand Canyon.
yeah.
That's a given. That's been for decades. To come up, that's why you're going to get out of Phoenix to go up to these areas. So nothing about that has changed. The only thing that's changed is cottonwood found its way several years back. So now we have a thing here. The wine industry in general, if you're familiar with kind of old world areas, it didn't really matter king, queen, dictator, fascist, president. Doesn't really matter. Those little communities that had vineyards and grow their own food and have more connection to the nuances of weather and are adaptable, they're still there. Hundreds of years of those things, and the way that they do business is not we have to grow 5% every year. It's like we have to survive every year. Put a little nest egg aside, but like the economy is not based on investors and growth and destruction of another country for resources.
Right. What is your first thing that you think of when you finish a show with Tool, for example? So you just got off tour. What's the first thing that enters your mind when you walk off stage? Are you thinking like, I got to get something to eat? Is there
I'm fucking hungry.
right?
Yeah.
How long between walking off stage until you eat is there?
Well, it depends on the project. We just got off with Pussifer. We just did a whole U.S. run for Existential Reckoning. So you got to get the makeup and the wig and all that stuff off, and then just get to a quiet space to just kind of decompress, and then whatever you have to resist the urge to eat all of the food on that plate, because now you got to go to bed. So you have to have, because you can't go to the restaurant and go, can you give me that? Can you give me that Thai food, but only give me 1/3 of it?
Right.
They're going to give you the whole thing, and so you have to have the discipline to not eat all of it. So yeah, so first thing off the stage is to unplug and find the quiet space with no noise, no interaction, and re-energize, both energetically and nutritionally, just reset.
Is there anything that you wanted to say about Pussifer or anything, or did you?
Well, I think I can give you some stuff that we're doing.
Yeah.
Pussifer's, because Matt and I and Karina, we work well with each other, and we're fairly organized, and we're kind of goal-oriented people. So we can go, we want to do this thing. Let's set the map up. So if we want this, we have to start back here and get that there. And we're very organized and set deadlines for ourselves. If we miss the deadline, we're not going to beat ourselves up, but wait, just set deadlines. So during COVID, we shot 4 pay-per-views, 2 of which are coming out this fall. We've got Conditions of My Parole, the whole album start to finish with a whole bunch of Billy D and Hildy bits mixed in. We've got a whole set of Vias, we're calling it Vias for Versatile. It's the Vagina era of music, completely revamped again. And we did it at Sunset Sound. We recorded a whole thing where we did a whole kind of, concert film studio documentary. So those 2 pay-per-views are coming out right around Halloween. So I'm very excited about those. And then, of course, simultaneously releasing the audio for those as well. We're going back on the road with Pussifer this fall around, and the show has been well received. So there's a lot of content out there that we're able to do with Pussifer. So if anything, I would like to promote that we're doing the pay-per-views released this fall.
Fantastic. Well, Maynard, thank you so much for making the time. It's such a pleasure to
Thank you.
to meet you.
Appreciate it.
And thanks for being here.
No problem.